Welcome to Showdown. I'm Mark Kaysen, and just a half an hour early here on the live show. So it is, first of all, the 26th of August. That's Monday. And once again, live from campus. So that's no problem. And we'll talk about a ton of things, to tell you the truth. And of course, you can always write in on the chat part if you have some comments. And by the way, I did want to apologize to Greg Carell for some things that we got into last week. It was really unnecessary, and gets a little high-pitched sometimes. But that's the way it goes. Yes, Michael, I'm early today. There's some things going on campus, so I thought I'd just get this in early before people all start coming and landing on my head, which ultimately they will. So, so many interesting things that happened this weekend, which you would think that there would be nothing interesting, because how could anything be different than what we've already gone through? The situation in the presidential race is clearly a mess. And when I say it's a mess, certainly not for Kamala Harris and the Democrats. They're flying through this thing. Everything is going right. And of course, the Democrats keep saying, well, we know there's going to be a problem, but we're just going to keep pushing forward, and we'll do whatever we have to overcome those problems when they come. Maybe there won't be any problems at all, I have to tell you, because Donald and that weird person that he's got running with him are involved in such craziness at this point that it's totally ridiculous. And the first thing that I'm going to say is not even so much them, although it is them, but this RFK business. Robert Kennedy Jr. is such a disaster that his family has said for years that there's something wrong with him. He is a disaster. I mean, Robert Kennedy is not the name that you think you know. This is somebody completely different. First of all, this business having to do with vaccine is not only lunacy, but it's extremely dangerous for the country. I mean, I would say or ask, why would you put the country through this mess? But it's because he's mentally ill also. But he's got a different mental illness than Donald Trump. I'll say that for sure. And one of the things that I think is so incredible is that he attempted to shop the same deal that he made with Trump with Kamala Harris. But Kamala wouldn't even talk to him, wouldn't even have the conversation, wouldn't even listen to what he was suggesting so that she could say no. He just was offering some kind of a discussion about leaving the race, and her campaign said, sorry, Kamala doesn't even want to talk about it. Now, I understand that everybody will say it never happened. And that's fine too. Say it never happened. But it's certainly happening with Trump. We know that for sure. Trump made a deal. Now, of course, they say that there's no deal. That Trump simply took the opportunity to get the endorsement. No quid pro quo, everything just on the table as we can see it, and end of story. would believe that? But again, it doesn't even matter. Bill Monroe says correctly, to heck with Kennedy. Who is he? Nobody. What's he got? Maybe 5% of the vote. Maybe. And I'd have to say that those 5% are people who probably have serious problems, again, mental problems anyway. But assume for a moment that that's not what's going on. And let's just talk about the fact that Kennedy has just been trouble for decades. And, you know, he says that the vaccines will cause autism. Which day did Robert Kennedy go to medical school? I'd like to know that one because I know the answer. No day. He did not go to medical school. He knows nothing about the connection between vaccines and autism or anything else for that matter. The vaccines save lives. It's that simple. And in addition, we know, you know, you in the case of COVID, you've got Paxlovid, which also saves lives. I don't know if there's any claim against that drug, but any of this discussion with people who aren't doctors is a bunch of foolishness. So, you know, I'm going to get past that, and I'm just going to say that if Bobby Kennedy, I hate to even say it that way because it makes it sound like it's almost real. If Junior wants to try to make a deal with Trump, and he's got a deal with Trump, and Trump's willing to make him an offer in a cabinet position in a Trump administration, well, good for them all, because there ain't going to be a Trump administration. So don't even worry about it. Kennedy isn't going to be anything anywhere except for some kind of a vaccine denier and whatever else he wants to do. I know something about bears, killing bear cubs in the park and some other weirdness. I mean, these people are weird. And why would Trump grab onto this? What, he's going to get 3% of the vote? 1% of the vote? Will it do him any good? Absolutely not. But I guess he figures at this point, whatever he can get, he'll take. And okay, good for him. So he's made that deal. But, you know, let's switch to something that makes sense. I've just wasted 8 minutes on nothing. Let's talk about Meet the Press this weekend, because there's no question that Kristen Welker just did a phenomenal job of tearing apart J.D. Vance. And I mean, he was ripped in every direction, put under a lot of pressure, and he was, you know, forced to say some things. Okay, I got you. Anyway, forced to say some things that absolutely are also crazy. As an example, J.D. Vance says there are 25 million immigrants in the United States today, illegal. Now, here's the problem. Everybody knows that number is so far from the truth that it's not even slightly realistic. The true number is maybe 8 million. In fact, that's what the government says, that 8 million are currently here in the United States, and J.D. Vance says 25 million. Well, you know, they're pumping up the numbers to try to make Kamala Harris look stupid, which doesn't even compute with anybody, because the claim by the Republicans as to what Kamala Harris was supposed to do in the first place is just wrong. Kamala Harris was given the following job. She was supposed to help some of the countries in Central America and maybe even South America to figure out what they could do to reduce the number of people who would leave their countries, to help them figure out what they could do. Not to deal with the United States policy, not to somehow button up the border. She wasn't given a job to be a border czar. I mean, that is ridiculous. Simply put, she was supposed to discuss with some of these countries what they might do in order to help keep their people from walking out the door. Now, the truth is that the border crossings today are below what they were under Donald Trump. But the first thing that J.D. Vance said was, well, that's true. They're not coming across in the regular border position. They're coming across somewhere else because of something that the administration is doing to mess with the numbers. Now I have to say this. I hope they're coming across somewhere, because these people have a right to come to the United States. This is a deal that we've made with the world. We allow people to come here who are in serious trouble in their countries. Maybe they'll be killed. Maybe their families are in danger. And so all of this, it's all things that we do need to deal with, but it's certain, and I'll get to that, Bill, hang on. But it's certainly not any indication, number one, that Kamala Harris is doing anything wrong, nor an indication that the administration is doing anything wrong either. Because border crossings have been a fact of life in America. Well, I happen to know it goes back to at least 1914, 1915, when the United States was encouraging border crossings, because they turned around and shipped those people off to Europe, where many of them died fighting in the war. They didn't know that was what was going to happen, but it's what ended up. And the truth is that there were people in Mexico, once that situation became apparent, who turned around and said, forget it, we're not going. But that was just one example. I mean, this has gone on for, like I say, well over 100 years. And there's no reason that we should be doing this and playing this game. The people that want to come here want a decent life. People who have come here, many have been here for 20 years. This is the only country some of them know. And we want to send them back to where? To some place that they've never seen before, that they've never known before, where not only is it dangerous, but for these people it would be especially dangerous because they have no knowledge of even how to live there, because they only know how to live here. So, that's one part of this equation. I got a question from Bill Monroe. So I'm going to switch to that for a second, and then I'm going to come back to immigration. I have plenty to say on immigration. But Bill asks, why does the United States want to arm Israel and the Ukrainian wars? Well, there are two clear-cut reasons, Bill, and I have no hesitation doing this. So the first part is that with regard to Israel, the United States went along with Britain and Israel all the way back in 1948 in order to set up a place where European Jews could go to live in peace after being annihilated, 6 million, in Germany. So the whole world was looking for somewhere to send the Jews, and the agreement, which was really set up by Britain, was to make this in Palestine. Now, I have to tell you, and I wish I had the video here, which I've promised and I've never brought, but there's a really interesting video that was created by the U.S. government, and it involves Israelis and Palestinians talking together about what they could do with Palestine together in the late 40s, and then the projection was into the early 50s. But somehow it all got turned upside down and it didn't work. But there's no question that in the initial agreement, the Palestinians were on board, or some were. Let me say some. I don't know everybody, but some were on board, and it all ended up going south. But I do have to say that the idea of these Jews, millions of Jews, having a place in the world to live, I mean, it shouldn't have been that big of a controversy. And beyond all of that, it really didn't have to be a controversy, because the United States could have, and I believe would have, stepped up to help the Palestinians if they hadn't decided that they could just annihilate Israel and then found out that it wouldn't work, because they tried, and they tried before the United States was pouring the weapons into Israel, and they couldn't destroy Israel even then. And by that time, the United States was supporting the Israeli forces, and then there was nothing that any of the Arab countries could do to stop this. And of course, one of the leaders in the battle was Egypt. And I just think it's interesting that within 30 years, after being beaten back repeatedly, Egypt said, you know what, give us our $1 billion a year and we'll walk away and we'll say it's okay. And that's what the United States has done, given them $1 billion a year to stop fighting. And in fact, they have stopped fighting. End of story. Now, as far as the rest of the Palestinians, there was a deal that was cut between Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton back in the 90s. And it was, as many people say, like 98% of what the Palestinians wanted. Here's the problem. First of all, the United States along the way reneged on the deal. So that's part of it. But beyond that part, Yasser Arafat decided to run away from the deal because he was afraid that the Palestinians would kill him. And by the way, they would have killed him. There's no doubt about it. So on one hand, some people didn't trust what the United States was actually doing. Again, this is in 1980. And on the other hand, the reality is the 1990s, the Palestinians wouldn't accept it anyway. Again, first, because Yasser Arafat was afraid he'd be killed, and secondly, because the Palestinians will not let go of the idea that they can wipe out Israel. So who's going to allow the Palestinians to wipe out Israel? It's a ridiculous conversation. It's not going to be allowed. It's not going to happen. And here we are in 2024, and you got ships over there that are just waiting for anybody to try to destroy Israel, because it just won't be allowed. The United States has made commitments, and they're standing by those commitments. And frankly, the whole world is standing by commitments to Israel from the standpoint of whether anybody is going to be allowed to annihilate Israelis. It's just not going to be allowed. I mean, after what happened in Germany, no one is going for that. Now, there is another possibility here, and it's a possibility that's more than a possibility. The United States would do this in a second. Everybody stops fighting, and the United States pours in unlimited money to help Palestine build a successful country right next to Israel. The United States supports Israel. The United States supports Palestine. End of conversation. Everybody stops fighting. The United States would buy that in 2 seconds. The Palestinians won't, because they think that they can destroy Israel. I don't know why they think it. Israel has obviously nuclear weapons, which say it's because of the United States. That's fine. Whoever it's because of, they've got it. So the answer is, just take the money from the United States, take the support from the rest of the world, and build up your country, and everybody become profitable. That's all you have to do. It's a simple equation. It would work, and there's no reason to not do it. It's just everybody's afraid to just say, okay, we'll accept it. They're just afraid. I don't know of what. Maybe afraid of Hamas. Maybe afraid of Hezbollah. Maybe afraid of Iran. I don't know. But I know this. Palestine could be a powerfully successful country with the support of the United States if they stop trying to kill everybody in Israel. And nobody in the world's going to allow them to do it anyway. So you might as well forget it, but they won't. So that's one reason. Now, as for Ukraine, it's a different story. But here's the deal. Russia wants to do in Ukraine what Hitler wanted to do in Germany. I mean, for Germany and in Europe. Hitler wanted to own Europe. Vladimir Putin wants to at least own Eastern Europe and probably all of Europe, if he could get his hands on it. And I've always said that he would really like to own the United States. And I think Donald Trump would turn it over to him if he could get elected president again. But let's leave that aside for the moment, because what I think you really have to recognize is that the United States had a deal with the Ukrainians. This is back in the early 90s when the Soviet Union imploded. There were nuclear weapons in Ukraine. They were Ukraine's weapons as far as Ukraine was concerned. They had been left there by the Russians, and the Russians were in no position to get their hands on it. And so, that was the end of the story. Now, the United States said, don't mess with those weapons. You don't even know what to do with them. Hand those weapons over to us. We will dismantle them. And then we promise that we won't let anybody take over your country, because if you had nuclear weapons, well, Ukraine would not be taken over. Nobody would even be bothering them. But that's not the case. And the United States is following its promise, as we should. Now, Bill says, and this is the last I'm going to say on that, billions are wasted on both of those wars, and thousands of lives are wasted. Yes, thousands of lives are wasted. But forget the billions being wasted, because here's the thing. If we stop the war, we're going to spend the billions building up the country. And I can tell you right now, the United States will make that deal tomorrow afternoon. Russia shuts the place down, all the fighting down, and the United States first will rebuild Ukraine. Now, get ready for this one. All Russia has to do is pull out of Georgia, pull out of Crimea, and leave everybody alone. The United States would start giving them money. Because like I've said so many times, the United States has spent billions of dollars on the people who heiled Hitler. Now, if we'll pay them, we'll pay anybody. We really will. Because in the long run, it saves us money. Because when we do, as you say, Bill, go into these wars and waste, it's just to no purpose, because people are dying and we're losing billions of dollars, when all we have to do is put those billions in, build up the people, and everybody can be happy. Now, you would say, perhaps, Bill, why give that money to Ukraine when we need that money for our people here in the United States, and certainly for Black people who have been mistreated for 400 years, 1619. So here's the answer to that. The United States could do it. We could put money into everything right now. The Republican Party will not approve 1 cent of it. Nothing. So it's not a question of whether the United States wants to do it. It's a question of what the Republican Party is willing to do. They're not going to spend any money on our people. You know, Donald says, America first. No, it's not America first. It's America never. I can tell you that for sure. America never. That's what Donald wants to do. And I'm sorry for the background noise. It'll go away in a second. But let me say, America never is a stupid policy. It's harming our country. We can afford lots of money. We can easily afford money. We're a very, very wealthy country. We can afford anything. We can borrow money. You know, nobody worries about lending money to the United States. We pay everybody back. We have never missed a payment, and we never will. So what you have to do is you simply have to turn the money over to all these people, let them have it, make deals, make arrangements, make plans to support people along with the money, and everybody could go home happy. But not the Russians. They don't want to do that. They want to prove that they are our equal. Now, you know they're not. How could they be? They've got a gross domestic product of just over $1 trillion. Our gross domestic product is over $27 trillion, headed for $30 trillion very shortly. And I can tell you this. It is sad that Russia, as John McCain once said, is nothing but a gas station with an army. And again, the United States is prepared to step up and help anybody in these kinds of circumstances, especially if it'll shut down wars. But see, Vladimir Putin would have to admit that he just doesn't have the strength of the United States, and he's never going to do that. That's just not even a possibility. Frankly, I think that the Chinese would be more willing to take help from the United States if we were willing to offer it, but certainly we're not going to do that when they are in the process of giving money to Russia to fight Ukraine, indirectly, but they're doing it. And beyond that, the Chinese are really stoking this anger in Russia against the United States for the purpose of creating discord among nations that deal with the United States, figuring somehow that this would benefit the Chinese financially. Bill, I think that's more than you were probably asking for, but I think the bottom line to it is that the United States really is not wasting money in turning money over to these other countries. It's just unfortunate that we're seeing lives lost because the Russians won't back down and because the Hamas won't back down. No one's going to allow Hamas to kill Israelis, not if they can avoid it. And no one is going to allow the Russians to march through Europe like the Germans did. And that's the end of the discussion. That's why we're not doing it. But let me switch to something else here, because I want to finish my immigration thoughts, but this is probably a perfect space to add in this talk about tariffs. You know, the United States fears what's going on in other countries, mostly having to do with manufacturing. We fear that other countries will pay low wages to their workers, and thereby the costs of their goods will be so small that they can sell their goods in the United States and undercut our manufacturing people. And we know that that has taken place for sure. However, there are other ways to address this. And one of the ways that is the worst is by charging tariffs that first are paid for by American citizens. We pay for it. We pay for it in the prices that are paid for goods, because I can tell you right now, the United States has a huge appetite for foreign goods. We love Mercedes, we love Lexus, we love all these great brands from other countries, and we're willing to pay for them. And so they throw tariffs on to the goods, and then the United States goes in and continues to buy them and makes it more difficult for others in the United States to buy these goods from other countries. But here is the problem, and this is a serious problem. Everybody who has studied the Great Depression knows that when the Depression got bad, the United States had slapped on these tariffs, which we at the time called the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, because they were named for the two people in the House and in the Senate that had sponsored the bills. And these tariffs sent us down a road that put not only the United States into a deeper and more profound depression, but also spread the depression all around the world. It was stupidity from an economic standpoint, and it's no different today. It hasn't changed. The facts are the same. We should not be running up these tariffs. They not only cost the United States consumer money, they cost people money all over the world, and they are depressing as all get out to the world economy. And if you want to push everybody into a new depression, just keep turning up these tariffs, because I guarantee you it'll get us exactly where it got us in 1932. It worked then, it'll work now, but against the interests of the United States, I can tell you that. So, you know, we have to stop talking about tariffs in terms of who is actually having to pay for them. We need to get rid of them. We need to stop it. Just walk away from it. The United States can compete with the rest of the world. You know, if you have a tariff here and there, you know, a minor tariff to protect something, that would be okay. We've done it before, and we could do it again, and it wouldn't hurt. But broad-based tariffs against other countries. It's asking for a disaster. And you know, we're just putting pressure on everything in a way that is absolute stupidity. So much of what is being said about the United States economically and about the rest of the world economically is just plain wrong. I mean, if you want to hear this sort of thing that's being told, the stories that are being spread out here, go find Stephen Moore. You can find him on Google any day. He talks on Fox News all the time, and he's the 100% worst economic quack on the face of the planet. I mean, he is a disaster. Just go check anything he's got to say, because I promise you, you'll find out that it'll make no sense. It costs people money in absolutely every wrong way. And I'm not even going to get into it all because it takes too long. And it's just a dumb story. Stephen Moore is a fool. No different in some ways than the America First people who led this entire bizarre concept back in the 1940s, the early 1940s. And at that time, it was led by Charles Lindbergh. And that was nonsense as well. But Lindbergh just, kept pushing it until Pearl Harbor. And after Pearl Harbor, the entire United States turned around and said, you got to be kidding. America first? America first is we get with the rest of the world and we shut down Japan and Germany. And it took 4 long years to accomplish that task. All of this could have been stopped in the first place without that America First lunacy. And you have to wonder at this point, why would Donald Trump, except for the fact that he's a psychopath, and why would his people go down a path that has been proven to take the United States into such darkness? There's just no other way to describe it. I mean, it just really hurt us. And like I say, 4 years to rebound from the mess. And that's also, like I say, includes what we did in the Depression that made things terrible in the first place. So 1932 and 1941 was pretty disastrous. And then we end up in World War II because these idiots are out here saying, same guys, by the way, same people selling the same craziness, just a sort of a different brand of it. But America First, it is just wrong as wrong can be for the United States. We are a leader in the world, and we are so strong. We are so capable in the work that we do with the rest of the world that the entire planet is willing to follow us practically to the end of the earth if we show them the money. And, somebody could say, well, that's our money. Or they could say, why should we bribe them? And I'll admit it's essentially a bribe. But if we're bribing them to help ourselves to live in peace and to create prosperity for other countries, which can rebound to us, well, I got to tell you, there's a value in all of that, and we should be willing to do it. And unfortunately, it's what I said earlier in this conversation. We are scared. People are out here trying to scare us, and it works. What are we afraid of? Afraid of immigrants who do no damage, but we're afraid of them anyway. We're afraid of inflation, which is almost back down to 2%, and which for the grocery store was a 1% increase in groceries for the entire last year. And, all this worry about economics where people say, oh, we're in a recession. We've been in a recession for years. For years, get out of here. We've been in a rocket ship to the moon when it comes to the valuation of American business. And, you know, it's not like we're going to stop it from ever going down again, because we won't. It's going to go down again, trust me. The only question is, how stupid are we going to be on the way to that decline? Why do we have to make it worse? Okay, so I'll cut that for a minute. And let me say one last thing here, and that is that Donald continues to go off the edge of a cliff. You know, this is August 26th, and he's got until September 20th to sell that stock. And that stock that he's got is now down to 21 again, and on its way, I believe, to $1. Good luck, Donald. I hope $100,000 will help you, because that's all you're going to have left at that point. Now, I'll take and I'm going to start, obviously, Wendy's, because Wendy's restaurant at 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road, they are not destroying Chesterfield Valley. They're not destroying St. Louis. They're not destroying Missouri. What they're doing is building up everybody's appetite for some of the best food that you're ever going to find in the city of St. Louis. They've got wings. They've got the meats that are smoked meats. They've got patty melts, and they've got cheeseburgers, and they've got hamburgers, and it's all outstanding food. It's really good. I love patty melts. Throw all those onions on that. Oh, they're just great. I love onions. And you know I'm big on onions, because you know I always talk about the onion rings that for me, go with those baby back ribs. And then on top of that, they've got salad, and they've got pizza, and they've got great drinks, because I've said before, you can't find better iced tea anywhere than at Wendy's on Chesterfield Road, 18,000 Chesterfield Road. So again, in addition to all the other things I mentioned, don't forget those baby back ribs. Don't forget the onion rings, and pour the onions on those patty melts. And I assure you, you're going to be happy people. And for the same great food, just go down the road to Defiance, Missouri, and there they have another Wendy's at $29.99, South Highway 94 in Defiance. I promise you, if you go to Wendy's, you're going to be very, very happy. You're going to love your meals. Okay, if you're looking for jewelry, 4506 Hampton is the place, and that is Jewels on Hampton. My good friend Al, his son AJ, and a whole host of people there who design jewelry and buy and sell jewelry and coins. They are just terrific business people, not only for themselves, but for you as well. They'll make things really excellent for you if you just go in. They're very fair. They're very honest, very transparent, as people like to say. Just go on in to 4506 Hampton, and they'll talk to you about designing jewelry. They'll talk to you about the jewelry cases that they've got in the store, one after another. They're just all over. And the jewelry is just exquisite and extraordinary. It's just that kind of a business, and you'll love it. And all you got to do is go to 4506 Hampton in St. Louis, and you will not be unhappy with their jewelry. Now, when it comes to men's clothing, it's the St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton. And I can tell you, at the corner of Forsyth and Central, they have clothes that are just outstanding, and the prices are so low, they just don't make sense. But apparently they've worked for the St. Louis Suit Company because they've been there for 30 years. So they're certainly making enough money to stay. But at the same time, you're never going to see these prices anywhere else. They are really outstanding. And so, you know, I just continue to buy all my suits at the St. Louis Suit Company. And it's not just because they lead me to the right colors, which they do, because I'm colorblind, and how would I know? But it's for more than that. It's because the suits are nicely priced, very quality, and it's it's just the perfect place to shop for men's clothing. And if you're looking for wedding attire, same thing. This is the place to go. The St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton. They're famous for it. Anytime I go in there to talk with Jay, that's the dad who runs all this stuff, I can tell you right now that they're always being approached over, this whole thing of wedding attire. People are always coming in and saying, yeah, I set up my wedding on such and such a date, and they go through and they're giving them their clothing. I mean, it's just the best when people want to get married. So go to St. Louis Suit Company for their men's clothing and also for their wedding attire as well. And keep in mind that they've got the overcoats, which I don't know what they're selling them for today, but I'll tell you this, you could have bought them at a great price all summer. And of course, it's 100 degrees out right now, but it's not going to be that way for long. This is like February upside down. Instead of 16 below, it's 100 degrees. But then what happens is everything moderates and you're on to the next season. And that's where we're going. So check out those overcoats at the St. Louis Suit Company, because it's time. It's past time, if you ask me, because this hot weather will be over before you know it. St. Louis Suit Company, 30 years in Clayton. Okay. So I'm going to go back to immigration. And let me say this. When J.D. Vance was on the phone, or I'm sorry, on camera, I don't know what, I'm losing my mind. Joe Biden moment, when J.D. Vance was on that camera over the weekend, he just did a typical Donald Trump. He lied about everything he was discussing, talking about separation of families and trying to lay the whole thing on Joe Biden and the Biden administration and Kamala Harris, talking about how she was the border czar and she wrecked everything. And we know none of that's true. None of it's true at all. Her job was very simple. She was there to try to help some of the Central and South American countries to figure out how to keep their people enticed to stay where they were. And some of them did, for sure. But I mean, what it comes down to is you got a lot of dangerous people in those countries that come after the people living there, and the people living there want to get out and save their families. And so that's what we're really looking at. And let me also say that this business about separation of families, there are 11 million who families who may have problems in this regard. And it was Donald who did this. It was Donald who made this a horrible situation. And the thing about it is that a lot of these families want to be restored with their kids. And the United States government is willing to help. But we've got no ability to do anything when the Congress is following the desires of Donald Trump, who will kill any kind of bill that will help anything in South America or at the border, for the simple reason that Trump wants to make sure that he has a chance to make an argument during the election. A chance, by the way, which is going nowhere, because I promise you, people in this country, as the Democrats are saying, are not stupid. Women are not stupid. Blacks are not stupid. Americans are not stupid. They're not going to follow Donald Trump in a direction which is just going to cause more misery and more chaos. This man has reached the end of the line when it comes to this mess. And I think that if you just keep watching, you're going to understand that all of this excitement behind Kamala Harris, first of all, it's there for a reason. She is extremely attractive as a candidate. Donald says so many bad things about her, and every bad thing he says just bounces straight off, because we can see, we know. Why would anyone take this that is true about her? She has a low IQ. She has terrible things in her talking about. They just words and hope. Now, thank you. Let's not forget one of the things that J.D. Vance did, and that is he got into this argument about the cat ladies, and it was just a dumb argument to even get into, because he was asked by Kristen Welker, do you regret saying what you did, considering the fact that so many people have said that they were hurt by your words? And so J.D. Vance made it very clear that he didn't regret any of it. He said, I have regrets in life, but this is not one of them. And then he went on to explain why the reasons for his words were actually justified. So, I mean, he walked out of this conversation where he was given every opportunity to clean up his mess, and he just couldn't do it. He just kept on going on. He just kept on talking about the ways in which his comments were actually right, because he says what he was doing was supporting family life in America. And you know what they want to return to. They want to return to the 1950s. And the fact is, as we have heard at many of these rallies for Kamala Harris, and at the convention as well, the line that Kamala came up with, I mean, she's smart as a whip, I'm telling you. We're not going back. That's what she said. And she's got people chanting it. And it's not mean, it's not nasty, it's not ugly. It's just a very simple thing. We're not going back. We're not going back to racism. We're not going to accept it anyway. The country is pushing forward. Supreme Court is pushing back. The Donald Trump people are trying to push back. Our school boards are trying to push back. But the country is saying otherwise, that they are not going back. It's a profound slogan, and it's one that has had powerful consequences in attracting more voters to Kamala Harris. There's no question about it. Now, you know, there's a thing about that they discussed at the meetings, at the discussions, you know, on air on Meet the Press over on Sunday, about this effort by the Trump administration to prevent the American public from taking Kamala Harris seriously. But here's the thing. They're not only taking her seriously, but they're turning down every criticism of Kamala Harris. They don't hear it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't believe it. They know that Donald just throws out funny names for people, and they don't think this is a funny situation. They understand that this is the president of the United States. And, you know, there are people out here who are, you know, the Earth 2 residents who pretend that this is all being done with an eye to saving America. But here's the thing. this make America great again. America's great now, and everybody knows it. And in fact, all around the world, people know it. The United States is prepared, and not just prepared. We are leading the way in everything. We're leading in NATO, where we've built up the NATO forces to protect against Vladimir Putin. We've established NATO in a way that is clearly going to stand up to Vladimir Putin. Always, there's just no circumstance under which they'll back down, and you know that is the exact reason that Vladimir Putin's accepting things which, under normal circumstances, he could never live with. I mean, look at what's happening. Ukraine is taking the weapons that we have recently sent, and he's using those weapons to attack in Ukraine, actually in Russia. So anyway, it's a horrible, situation. It's going nowhere for the Russians. It's certainly building up the Ukrainians, because their degree of confidence in what's going on is just phenomenal, and it's going to only end in one way. Again, the United States is going to spend the money to rebuild Ukraine, and they're going to do it when Russia has finally given up and walked in the other direction. They will stop. This will end, but it's not going to end well for Vladimir Putin, and frankly, it's not going to end well for Donald either. So keep all of this in mind, because frankly, things that are being done there are things that are very helpful to the United States, which is in fact the leader of the world in a way which we learned works at the end of World War II, and we've done it for almost 80 years, and we're not going to stop now. But one thing we are going to stop now, and that's Showdown. So I'm going to stop out of here. I'm going to get out of here actually a minute or two early. Got some things to do up here on campus. So I'm going to say that for the St. Louis Suit Company, for Wenty's for sure out in Chesterfield Valley, and for Jules on Hampton, this is Showdown, and I'm Mark Kaysen. I'll be back tomorrow in the studio. Good night.